What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. Hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and that you are enjoying conference championship weekend in the world of college football. This video is dropping on Saturday, December the 6th, 2025. So if you are a UNT fan, I know we have some, fully Dallas people, University of North Texas people, and whatnot who root for the Cowboys and subscribe to the channel and whatnot. I hope that Friday night went well for you. Although I say that, and I don't know if I mean it. I'm recording this on Friday afternoon, so the game has not happened. But obviously, John Sumrall of Tulane is the new Florida Gators head coach. I'm a Florida Gator grad student, and so I just hope it went well for John Sumrall. It's really kind of how I feel. But looking forward to the rest of conference championship weekend, and I hope your team wins, whoever they are. It will give us something to serve as a distraction after what happened to our beloved Dallas Cowboys on Thursday night. It's been a busy weekend, obviously, early on, depending on when you're watching this, obviously. But I did have the interview that was scheduled that I told you about in our post-game show here on the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel with Tyler Smith. So that dropped on Friday. You can go watch that, obviously, here on the channel, which is why this video is dropping on Saturday. So some stuff to keep you busy throughout the first full weekend in the month of December. Right? Is that correct? Yeah, it is correct. Time, tends to kind of blur all together when we get to this part of the calendar when the Cowboys, when they do play these back-to-back Thursday games, it makes things feel a little bit wonky. And so even though it's only been, I don't know, like 18 hours for me at the time I'm putting this together, it's been, I don't know, 30, maybe 36, maybe 48 hours for you when you're watching this. It's still just such a bummer. The Cowboys have very, very, very little hopes relative to the playoffs. We have a rooting guide that is available for you at bloggingtheboys.com. We're sharing that all throughout the weekend on social if you want to check that out as well. The brass tacks of it all is that you need to root for. Let me see if I can share this for you. I don't know if I can. Let me try this here. Let's see this. Let me see if I can do this. I hadn't planned on this, which is why I'm a little. It might look weird. I don't. Whoops, that's the screen that we're going to look at in a second here. Let's take this off, and there we go. I'm going to show that to you in a moment, but this is our rooting guide for week 14 for the Dallas Cowboys. In case you're curious, this is geared towards the Dallas Cowboys obviously earning a playoff spot. We all understand what happened on Thursday night. We all understand the Cowboys made matters more difficult for themselves relative to the playoffs. But if you are curious, this is the rooting guide. We are rooting for, as Dallas Cowboys fans, the Atlanta Falcons to beat the Seattle Seahawks, the New Orleans Saints to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Chicago Bears to beat the Green Bay Packers, and the Arizona Cardinals to beat the Los Angeles Rams. Those four games are all relative to the NFC wildcard race. If the Cowboys are not able to win the NFC East, these are very big ifs, by the way. Again, we're just looking at the facts of the matter. Those are the four games that obviously we hope go a certain direction relative to the Cowboys and their playoff interest. But the most critical, the most probable, as we've been saying for a little while now, path to the playoffs for the Cowboys, not that it is probable, but the more probable potential hypothetical outcome is that the Cowboys win the NFC East, and this would involve the Eagles continuing to collapse, which is why we are rooting for the Los Angeles Chargers to beat them. That game is on Monday Night Football this week. The Cowboys would have to win out and pick up 3 more losses from the Eagles. So this is hopefully step one relative to that potential goal. But there you go. There you have it. That is the rooting guide for this week. Let me get this off your screen. And there we go. And this is what we're going to look at in just a moment here. All right. What you're going to look at is going to upset you. And it upset me when I looked at it on Friday morning. But let's just go ahead. It awkwardly showed up on your screen a couple of times. Something that I think needs to really be looked at over the course of the offseason is the Cowboys special teams group. Cowboys special teams coordinator Nick Sorensen has done a pretty poor job this season. I don't like saying things like that because I would be upset if someone said I was doing a poor job, but this game was horrible from a special teams coverage standpoint for the Cowboys. You can't say the special teams are bad because Brandon Aubrey is amazing, but I do believe the Cowboys missed John Fossil. The Cowboys special teams was a disaster before John Fossil arrived, and then he's gone, and all of a sudden they're a disaster once more. But shout out John Fossil. That being said, what I want you to look at here is look at the column that says obtained. These are the possessions that the Detroit Lions had on Thursday night. and then look, obviously, at their starting field position, which is the next column over, which is where it began. So at the very top there, the Cowboys deferred when they won the opening coin toss. So they kicked off, which is how the Lions obtained the possession. It was off of a kickoff, and they began at their own 36-yard line. The reason I want you to look at this is there were 7 possessions on Thursday night in which the Lions began a possession off of a kickoff, not a punt or an interception or something like that. So let's look at those starting field positions for the Lions. To start, again, we're going top to bottom here. Their own 36-yard line, their own 47-yard line, their own 29-yard line. Okay, that's more respectable. Their own 26-yard line. Okay, we're doing okay. Their own 32-yard line, still not great. And then you can see these dashed lines are the breaks for the quarter. So down in the fourth quarter there, their own 32-yard line, and then the 2 drives that ultimately ended the would-be comeback from the Cowboys, their own 41-yard line and their own 49-yard line. With the game most up in the air, with the Cowboys trying with all of their might to make this a contest, to rally. The special teams coverage unit for the Cowboys allowed the Lions, one of the best offenses in the NFL, to begin as a result of special teams collapsing on their own 41 and 49-yard lines. You're talking about this group had to go 59 and 51 yards respectively, which they ultimately did. As you can see, those possessions ended in touchdowns for Detroit, and that's how this game ultimately effectively ended. But that just simply cannot happen. That is a failure of galactic proportions in the Dallas Cowboys special teams coverage unit. There's just no way around that. Now, if we look over here, because this is part of the problem, I'm going to zoom on over to the left here. This is these are the Cowboys possessions. And this is important, I think, to kind of discuss and talk about out loud because, well, the Cowboys aren't a great special teams unit themselves in terms of, returns and things like that. So let's look at their own starting field position here. Forget how they obtained it, but we can talk about it relative to context. These are all of the possessions that the Cowboys had on Thursday night against Detroit. The first one they had was off of a kickoff. That was after Detroit scored their opening field goal. They began at their own 32-yard line. Then the punt, and they began at their own 5-yard line. Then things got, tough. That was after the Cavante Turpin, situation and whatnot. And ultimately almost ended in a safety, but that was a disaster. Then off of a kickoff, their own 30-yard line, off of a punt, their own 21-yard line, off of a kickoff, their own 20-yard line, off of a kickoff, their own 30-yard line, their own 35, their own 42, their own 30, their own 33, their own 31. The Cowboys, of all of their possessions against the Detroit Lions on Thursday night, only began north of their 35-yard line, once? Right? Down there, the final possession they had, not ultimately, but get my point, the third quarter off of the missed field goal. And that wasn't even something that came as a result of a great return. That was the block, right? That was technically the special teams unit, right? It's a collective group, a collective team, the special teams side of the ball. But the Cowboys have had just nothing coming from the return game so far. Cavante Turpin, I mean, the fair catch fiascos are one thing, but he is not providing any element of return consistency for the Cowboys. Look at these starting field positions for Dallas on Thursday night. It is nothing to write home about. Again, it's not a shock that the best one came as a result of a blocked field goal because that's just the nature of a blocked field goal. But the Cowboys have to be getting more than this. I mean, you're asking the offense to do so much because of what the defense is or has been for a large majority of the season. Now you're asking them to do it to an even more difficult degree by having to travel extremely farther than they should have to because the return group isn't offering them anything when they get the ball in their hands. It's a tough scene. So yeah, I told you it was going to upset you. I did not want to go that route, but I had to because, well, that's just the way it goes. I want to show you a few more things. Just one of those days where there's stuff happening all over the place that is frustrating to look at. So I think that this is not fully representative. Let's just explain. On Thursday night, the Cowboys finished north of 30 points and north of 400 total yards. It's a very solid outing offensively, right? You score 30 or more points, you have 400 or more total yards. That is typically representative of a good day at the office from the offense. Now, I don't mean to pick at the offensive production, but I don't want to say that it was garbage time, but it was desperation time for the Cowboys down the stretch. It still all counts, and I'm not trying to, again, say anything negative about it, but I think you get my point. I think it's understood. That being said, even if you don't want to pick at it or whatever, even if you just want to look at it and say they cleared 30 points and 400 total yards, this was only the 16th time in Dallas Cowboys franchise history that they did this and lost, right? If you're putting up over 30 points and over 400 total yards, if you're meeting both of those thresholds in a singular game, you are typically going to win. And these are some heartbreaking losses, obviously, the Cowboys have had. The most recent time that this had happened prior to Thursday night was Thanksgiving Day in 2021 when they lost in overtime against the Raiders, the Anthony Brown game, all that stuff. So, I mean, look, it's hard, right? It's hard to put up this much production and lose a game. These are the only times that has happened in Dallas Cowboys franchise history. 16 instances, and 3 of them were in overtime. Amazingly, of the 16, only 2 of them have now been on the road, and this was only the second one. The first one that they lost on the road of this variety was early in the 2020 season when Dak Prescott was thrown all over the place and the defense was even worse. And Brian Schottenheimer was a part of that one as well. The only 2 times in Dallas Cowboys franchise history where the Cowboys have put up over 30 points and 400 total yards and lost on the road, Brian Schottenheimer was there. So interesting common denominator. I don't know. I mean, like, this is the kind of thing where we're just going to find more and more things to get upset about. That's kind of how I feel ultimately, and kind of how I think we're all going to feel for a while. And we're going to feel that way until something positive happens, right? Like maybe if the Cowboys ultimately rip off some sort of playoff this, playoff that, whatever. Let's take a look at the New York Times playoff simulator. So this is the situation following Thursday Night Football. And this is, again, how the New York Times views it, their odds, their model, et cetera, et cetera. So at this moment in time, the Cowboys have a 9% chance of making the playoffs. That is very low. We talked about this in the postgame. But if we give the Cowboys wins in each of their 4 remaining games, and I think they'll be favored in all these games. They opened as 6.5-point favorites against the Vikings for next Sunday night. But if we give them wins, this jumps up to 47%. That's independent of anything else happening around them. Now, we talked about how the Eagles are going to have to pick up at least 3 losses for the Cowboys to win the division. And I think, again, that is the most practical way that they're going to be a playoff team, if they're going to be a playoff team. Because for the Cowboys to be an NFC wild card at this point, they'd obviously have to win their remaining games, which is a difficult enough ask in and of itself. But they'd also have to get multiple collapses, right? It's a hard thing to say, Cowboys, need the Eagles to collapse, right? Asking the Eagles to lose 3 of 5 games is difficult, even if you think they are dealing with some sort of existential crisis. But if you think the Cowboys are going to be some sort of wild card, now you're asking for the 49ers and the Packers, or the 49ers and now the Lions, or the Packers and the Lions. You're asking for multiple teams to have the very, very, very difficult thing, which is why the NFC East is not, again, a probable outcome for the Cowboys, but the more probable outcome, because it's just the path where you're depending on the least amount of incredibly difficult things or incredibly improbable things to happen. And so if we look at it, once again, if the Cowboys win out, that would put them at 10-6-1 on the season. And say they pick up the help they need from an Eagles perspective. Say the Chargers win on Monday Night Football. That would be awesome. There is no way the Eagles are going to lose to the Raiders. I'm sorry, no matter how much we want to try to manifest things. And let's say that they split with Washington, which is what obviously we as Dallas Cowboys fans would need. Let's say they lose the game on the road, the Eagles do, which would be the first one they play in Week 16. Then we as Cowboys fans would need the Bills to take care of business, and that would be enough. Even if the Eagles won their final game against the Washington Commanders, let's give it to them. If the Philadelphia Eagles lose 3 of their 5 remaining games and the Dallas Cowboys win out, the Dallas Cowboys win the NFC East, and we party. But I think we all agree at this point in time that feels incredibly improbable for obvious reasons. Now, the Cowboys have only themselves to blame for this, to be very clear here. I am not as mad as I typically am in situations like this. I think that, the Cowboys won 3 games in a row, and that was a lot of fun. And I think we gave them a lot of, credit and a lot of praise. And I think it was deserved. I stand by all of the credit and praise and, kudos that I gave the Cowboys following their 3-game winning streak. It was just, it's difficult to win 4 games in a row. Many people have said that this Cowboys season is going to be defined in retrospect by the losses to Chicago and Carolina and Arizona. Now, obviously, the Bears and Panthers look good in their own different respects, to this point of the season. But if we're talking about when those games happened, the Cowboys were favored on the road against the Bears, and they were favored on the road against the Panthers. They were obviously favored at home against the Cardinals. Those are 3 games that, from an odds maker's perspective, the Cowboys should have won, and they lost them. And so it became for the Cowboys a matter of now you have to go win some games that you're supposed to lose, right? They were favored against the Raiders. They won that game, but they were underdogs against the Eagles and they won. They stole that one, right? They were underdogs against the Chiefs and they won. They stole that one. So this most recent game against the Lions, that was another game in which Dallas was the underdog and they had to steal it. And it's difficult. It's difficult to steal that many and to make up for the ones that you dropped along the way. And so I don't think we have to significantly overreact to what happened on Thursday. It was frustrating and embarrassing, and there were a lot of mistakes that should not happen. But with regards to the totality of this season, they just dug too deep of a hole. And I recognize there is technically a possibility that they can still climb out of it, but this was always going to be a very difficult thing when they lost that third game that we're talking about to the Cardinals to fall to 3-5-1. It's just you can't do that. You can't make mistakes, throughout the entire offseason, call it what you want, mistakes or whatever, and then not do anything, at least in the offseason, or not do serious things and not do them in September and not do them in early October, the majority of October. And then all of a sudden at the trade deadline say, now we want to play. Now we want to be a part of it. Now we want to try and think it's going to do enough to be enough. That's just not going to happen in any professional sports league or even any amateur sports league. You have to consider this, as Stephen Jones likes to say, a 365-day proposition. And if you treat it that way, then you won't be in those deep holes. But until you actually act the way you speak, you're going to be in situations like this more often than not. And I think that kind of summarizes how I feel at this point in time. Again, I think the Cowboys deserve credit for what they did, after the bye and through Thanksgiving. And we have some time to kind of think about it some more and let everything marinate. But yeah, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. So if you haven't watched it yet, the interview I conducted with Tyler Smith is available on our YouTube channel. And it was a lot of fun. He recommended a video game to me, Ghosts of Yote, which a lot of people recommend, but it was super awesome. It was one of my favorite interviews I've ever done. So highly, highly, highly recommend. But yeah, other than that, I'll be back on Monday breaking things down, and a new week is upon us, a new normal week, right? Like a full week, and then the Cowboys playing on Sunday. It's been a minute since that was the case. But if you haven't yet, please subscribe here to the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel. You can hang out with me on any level of social media. All the links to all my social profiles are down in the description below. Obviously, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend, wonderful rest of your day. And thank you for giving me a little bit of it. So have a great and wonderful time, everyone. I love you all, and we will see you next time. Go Cowboys.